Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Asian markets are off to a subdued start after a long weekend. Some markets continue to remain shut due to the Easter holiday. Sri Lanka has imposed a nationwide curfew after multiple explosions killed over 200 people and injured close to 450. In earnings, it was a strong March quarter for HDFC Bank. Net profit rose 23% compared to last year, while provisions for bad loans declined sequentially. Reliance Industries also reported Q4 numbers on Thursday. Net profit fell for the first time in 17 quarters. Reliance Jio's average revenue per user fell for the sixth straight quarter. The Chief Justice of India has denied charges of sexual harassment leveled against him, but legal minds question the fact that he chaired the bench that heard the case. Let's talk about that session on Wall Street now. It was a quiet session of trade ahead of the long weekend. Despite moderate gains, the S&P 500 ended the truncated week with losses. Markets brace for a data-driven week as corporate earnings and GDP data for the first quarter will be in focus. Renita Young of Bloomberg News brings you up to speed with everything that happened in that Wall Street session.
U.S. markets are slightly higher ahead of the long Easter holiday weekend. The S&P 500 nudging above that key 2,900 level after retail sales posted their largest gain since September 2017, and the latest unemployment filings fell. Meanwhile, gains in industrial stocks outweighed losses in health and energy sectors, and that Mueller report did not really impact markets as much at all. Pinterest soaring as high as 30% above its IPO price after raising more than $1.4 billion in its initial public offering. Blackstone Group surging after saying it'll convert into a corporation. BB&T topping first quarter earnings, and SunTrust Bank seeing its earnings per share above expectations for the first quarter. We know other earnings are coming next week, and that includes Kimberly-Clark, Halliburton, Whirlpool, and Wynn Resorts, among other companies. Meanwhile, WTI declined a little bit, and U.S. 10-year Treasury yield also faded just a tad bit, but the U.S. dollar was a little bit higher versus major currency competitors, and the Bloomberg Dollar Index ended a tad bit higher as well. That's a look at your Wall Street markets for Thursday. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
Well, a lot of people have been watching out for that yield curve over the past few months. In fact, some of them suggesting that it is a precursor to a recession, but in fact, very recently, a couple of economists at Bank of America have suggested that it is not as strong as an indicator as it used to be. But let's look at the Asian markets that have opened this morning. Several markets remain shut because of the long weekend. In fact, on account of Easter holidays, you have markets in Australia, in Hong Kong, that remain shut today. Early this morning, you had both the Nikkei and the Kospi in South Korea trading with moderate gains. You have a few other markets that have come online, including the one in China. You have the Chinese benchmarks that are trading a little weak. You have the Shanghai composite that is trading just about flat, 2 basis points in the red. You also have the China A50 that's trading with cuts of as much as 0.3% as of now. But we'll know more when more of those markets really have a little time to play. The Chinese markets have just about opened up. Tell you about perhaps the biggest update over the weekend, and quite a sad one, in fact, in one of the worst acts of violence since the civil war ended a decade ago in Sri Lanka. Over 200 people were killed and over 450 injured after multiple explosions rocked churches and luxury hotels in Sri Lanka's capital city of Colombo. The administration has imposed a nationwide curfew as the security forces try to maintain law and order in the island nation. Haslinda Amin of Bloomberg News brings you the latest in this report.
Sri Lanka is in a state of complete chaos. What carnage! That series of coordinated explosions on Easter Sunday sending chills and concerns. Sectarian violence may erupt yet again in Sri Lanka. Now hundreds now in hospitals. The death toll rising to more than 200. Churches, hotels across the country were attacked, including in the capital and areas like Negombo, like Batikaloa. Now foreigners were not spared, Paul, and according to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, several Americans were among those killed. No one has claimed responsibility, but about a dozen suspects have been taken into custody. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says authorities had received warnings, but nothing was done. Now Sri Lanka will have to look deeper into it, though. The priority is stability. Here's what Wickremesinghe has to say.
While this goes on, we must also look into why adequate precautions were not taken in this respect. But first and foremost, we have to ensure that terrorism does not lift its head in Sri Lanka. We cannot allow that. And we are prepared to take all measures necessary to ensure that terrorism is contained and wiped out in this country.
All measures, including nationwide curfew, that's been imposed. Social media access also curbed. The likes of Facebook, WhatsApp, all blocked, and that's to restrict information. Now, interesting to note that the strikes are not like what we've seen before. Remember, this country, no stranger to war. It's seen decades of civil strife. This attack, though, is slightly different. Not on the Buddhist Sinhalese majority or the mostly Hindu Tamil minority. The attacks this time pretty much on Christians, foreign tourists. Condemnation coming from all around, including global leaders like President Trump.
All right, speaking about President Trump, he is going to be quite the busy man this week. He's got talks with Japan to look forward to. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will be traveling to the U.S. to hold talks with President Donald Trump to discuss a potential free trade agreement. Kathleen Hayes of Bloomberg News tells you what is on the cards.
These talks will be held at the White House. President Trump is hosting Prime Minister Abe. The last talks were just a couple of weeks ago. So what's on the table now, of course, especially for President Trump, is the agricultural industry, because they want a deal will crack open Japan's market, particularly to exports of goods like beef and pork. And of course, Prime Minister Abe wants to avoid tariffs or quotas on very important, very lucrative auto exports to the United States. On the U.S. side, the agricultural side, they're concerned that the U.S. is going to lose sales to Japan because of the fact that Trump walked out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership shortly after taking office. But 11 members have gone ahead with a comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. So countries who are in that bloc, like Australia, now have advantages over U.S. farmers when it comes to exporting to Japan. And as I just said, from Prime Minister Abe's side, certainly this whole project now, Abenomics, boost growth, boost inflation. Exports are a key part here, and Japan can ill afford losing any ground on the auto exports. So we shall see what happens just over the next couple of days, more towards the end of the week, just after the BOJ has wrapped up its meeting. But there's a lot riding on both sides. Well, it seems to me they have a lot to gain by getting a deal. We'll see if anything stands in the way of that.
All right, well, clearly, that's one of the big talking points going into the new week. To have a look at what is making headlines across the globe, here's, the big headlines from Bloomberg.
The Trump administration is poised to tell 5 nations, including allies Japan, South Korea and Turkey, that they'll no longer be exempt from U.S. sanctions if they continue to import oil from Iran. The move would also affect China and India. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo plans to announce later on Monday that the administration will not renew sanctions waivers for the 5 when they expire on May 2nd. President Trump's lawyer says there's nothing wrong with accepting help from Russia. Rudy Giuliani told CNN that any political candidate would accept potentially damaging information on an opponent and that, quote, it just depends on where it came from. Giuliani's comments are part of the Trump administration's response to the Mueller report into alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. Global global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok and Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Haslinda Amin. This is Bloomberg.
All right, return to action for the Indian markets after quite a while. Agam Vakil is here to tell you all about the trade setup for the day and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, a couple of heavyweights will come to the markets, or rather will start trading today after earnings, and a lot to be priced in. What are you looking forward to?
Well, Reliance Industries and HDFC Bank, Alex, as you put it, heavyweights which will influence markets. Earnings have come through, and we've seen mixed earnings, at least as far as Reliance Industries is concerned. HDFC were largely in line with expectations. Well, as far as your indices go, last Thursday we saw a little bit of weakness, much more weakness in the mid-cap and the small-cap indices in comparison to the benchmarks, with the banking index, which will remain a focus considering HDFC Bank has come up with earnings which are in line with expectations. That did see a decline around 1%, the PSU banking index down by 2%. But areas for now, well, advancing as far as Wipro, Tata Motors, Dr. Reddy's and HDFC Bank is concerned. HDFC Bank showing very little movement as far as area is concerned after its earnings, and Vedanta, ICICI Bank and Infosys showing some amount of weakness. Vedanta perhaps stands out here, down by as much as nearly 3%. How were the FII flows? Well, 1,000 odd crores coming in. On the other hand, 337 odd crores moving out from the DII stable. And that said, when it comes to contributors, we're keeping an eye on Reliance Industries, which will also react to earnings. TCS, Tata Motors and JSW Steel providing some amount of support. And on the other side, we will have, well, this of course is HDFC Limited, but HDFC Bank will also have some say in the movement of the indices in today's day of trade. But moving on to your futures and options space, well, we did have 3% added in OI towards perhaps shorts, considering we didn't see too much movement on the downside, but well, downside all the same. And the Nifty banking futures should also come up on your screen. This is where we've also seen significant shorts coming through. Now, when it comes to your open interest distribution, well, we're looking at the same 500-point range. Nothing much has changed there. But what about changes in open interest? Let's take a look at that. And we've seen more and more writing at the higher levels, such as 11,800, 900, as well as 12,000 calls. But moving on to your India Volatility Index, that rose another 5%. Now at considerably heady levels at around 22.7. So we continue to keep an eye on this one. But well, the VIX is likely to remain at high levels unless and until we get done with the elections. And that is, of course, the guess out here. The Nifty at around 1.57. So it's come off to a certain extent after hitting the mark of 1.8. In terms of stocks which are in the F-Nom band, we have IDBI Bank, Vodafone Idea, as well as PC Jeweler, and also Reliance Capital is the new in ban. On the other hand, Jet Airways and Reliance Power moves out of the F&O band. It may just be another very tough day for Jet Airways, considering it's moved out of the band. That means you could see fresh positions being taken in this one. Say for that, we have keeping an eye on something like Max Financial Services as well as Chennai Petro. And in terms of stocks which are seeing unwinding, keeping an eye on Sun TV, well, Jet Airways, the kind of positions it's seeing built, and of course NID Technologies. All in all, we're expecting some amount of consolidation on the index level, Alex, but there will be a lot of stock-specific movement today.
Let's talk about a couple of them. Thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's talk about the two heavyweights, really, that reported their earnings while the markets were shut. Let's start, in fact, with Reliance Industries. Somit Sarkar is joining me to tell you all about those earnings. Somit, I understand that the earnings were in line with estimates. They were lower, but they were in line. Can you take us through the fine print?
Well, for the standalone business, if you see, the earnings were in line with the analyst estimates, but for the Jio side, the numbers were below analyst estimates. Now, I'll start off with the standalone business first. Now, if you see the Reliance Industries net profit, now that declined by nearly 4% to close to 8,500 crore rupees, and this is the first time it has declined in the last 17 quarters because of a weakness seen in both of its key segments, that is the refining and the petrochemical segment. Now, for the refining business, if you see the key number, that is the gross refining margin, that came at around $8.2 per barrel, which is the lowest in the last 17 quarters. Now, this coupled with lower volumes due to a plant shutdown impacted the refining segment performance in the fourth quarter of financial year 2019. However, something to cheer for from the refining segment was was its premium to the Singapore gross refining margin. Now that expanded to $5 per barrel, that is the highest in the last 7 quarters. Now the petrochemical segment, now after 8 strong quarters, earnings from the petrochemical segment declined by nearly 3% to close to 7,900 crore rupees. Now this is the first decline in the last 9 quarters due to weak prices and marginally lower volume offtake. And this quarter also, retail segment stood out once again for Reliance Industries on the consolidated basis. A retail segment EBIT margin was the highest ever at 4.7%. However, the revenue and EBIT growth rate of the retail segment has now slowed down. Now, if you see the revenue and EBIT growth rate for the retail segment in the 4th quarter was the lowest in the last 9 quarters. Now coming to Jio, now Jio earnings were a disappointment primarily because of lower than expected average revenue per user. Now, analysts were expecting the ARPU number to be close to 129 rupees, but the company's ARPU came down to close to 126 rupees, a decline for the 6th consecutive quarter now for Reliance Jio.
Now, Somit, one of the key parameters that a lot of watchers of Reliance have been looking at is the debt levels, and all those investments have actually led to a burgeoning of that debt. What are the numbers as they stand right now?
So for the financial year 2019, if you see, Reliance Industries total debt jumped by the most in at least the last 9 years, and this is despite the demerger of its tower and fiber assets. Now the total debt number jumped by nearly 31% on the back of a capital expenditure of over 1,32,500 crore rupees done by the company in FY19. However, a rising contribution from the petrochemical business, retail and Jio has kept the company's leverage ratio, that is the total debt to EBITDA, more or less stable at close to 3.43 times. Now if you see, at the end of financial year 2019, Reliance Jio had transferred its tower and fiber assets in an investment infrastructure fund. Now the company had invested close to 1,25,000 crore rupees in this asset, but currently it values them at close to 2,03,000 crore rupees. Now because of this demerger, it also transferred a debt that is bank borrowings and other liabilities worth 70,700 crore rupees in this investment infrastructure fund. But despite this, the company's debt was higher by nearly 31%. Also, now this move of transferring the assets will lead to an increased cost for Reliance Jio in financial year 2020, as they will have to now start paying for using this tower and fiber assets to the InvIT, which could result into a lower EBITDA and profits for the company in starting 1st quarter of financial year 2020.
Thanks so much for that, Somit. Well, let's go to the other big entity, that's HDFC Bank, that reported earnings over the weekend. In fact, it reported strong 4th quarter numbers. Darshan Mehta is here to tell you all about that. Darshan, another 20%, the mark hit again, both on NII and PAT, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so they continue to grow at 20%. That's the number, and it was an inline set of numbers. While NII grew 23%, even the profit number was up 23%. The asset quality did manage to improve slightly, so that works in favor of HDFC Bank. And the other reason that profit was up was the fact that provisioning was down almost 14% this time around. Advances were up almost 25%. Deposits were up 17% for them. CASA deposits were up 14%, so strong numbers that came in. As far as the retail loans were concerned, that was up 19%. The wholesale loans were up almost 32%. NIMs at net interest margins at 4.4%, which is extremely strong for HDFC Bank. Cost to income ratio at 40%, capital adequacy ratio at 17%, and Tier 1 capital at close to 16%. So even on the internal matrices, in line to slightly strong set of numbers from HDFC Bank.
Thanks so much for that, Darshan. Well, let's talk about the stocks and news. Mishika Parak is joining us now to tell you all of the other stocks that will be likely at the center of action today. Mishika, what's on your list today? Morning.
Good morning. So the first one on my list is Dr. Reddy Laboratories. US FDA has classified inspection for the Andhra Pradesh formulations plant as voluntary action initiated. On January 15th, US FDA had issued Form 483 with 4 observations for this plant in its audit. Then Brickwork Ratings and Care Ratings downgrade Reliance Capital's rating to A+ and A for long-term debt program, market-linked debentures and subordinated debt. The downgrade was made due to change in parent company. Then Brickwork Ratings and Care Ratings has downgraded Reliance Home Finance's rating to A+ and BBB+ on long-term debt program, market-linked debentures, subordinated debt and non-convertible debentures. GVK Power and Infra's arm signs agreement with Abu Dhabi Investment Authority and National Investment and Infrastructure Fund for investment in new shares in the group's airport holding company, equating to 49% stake. The proceeds from the proposed transaction will be used by GVK towards retiring debt obligations of up to 5,750 crore rupees. Then Asian Granito enters the sanitary ware segment with 160 SKUs in products including wash basins, water closets, urinals, etc. The company will invest 8 crore rupees in expansion in this segment and expects this business to have a turnover of 80 to 100 crores in the next 4 to 5 years. The commercial launch is expected to be done by June across India. Then let's have a look at the important results. Tata Coffee came in with a good set of numbers. Their revenues from operations was up 5% at 460 crore rupees. EBITDA is up 69% at 62.3 crore rupees. EBITDA margins stand at 13.6% versus 8.4%, and PAT is up 63% at 10.5 crore rupees. And lastly, we have results of ICICI Lombard General Insurance. They came in with a weak set of numbers. Their gross direct premium was up 19.1% at 345 crores. Their net income is up 7.5% at 228 crores. Solvency ratio is at 2.24 times versus 2.05 times, and they declared a dividend of 3.5 rupees per share.
Thanks for that, Mishika. Well, the Chief Justice of India, Ranjan Gogoi, has called a special sitting of a three-judge bench on Saturday, which he chaired himself. He did this to refute charges of sexual harassment leveled against him. He called it a plot and a threat to the independence of the judiciary. But some legal minds have questioned the need for Justice Gogoi to hear a case where he is an accused himself and suggest that he should have recused himself.
The Chief Justice, Harris's advocates were not prepared, rightly so. But sexual harassment, I think it's unbelievable, absurd. Yeah. I don't know. I think some staffer made it. Maybe some action was taken against her, the Chief Justice, and she made this allegation. And nothing in them. But the Chief Justice should not have taken any part. Of course, he accused himself. Yeah. But he should not have said, this is my asset, these are my allegations. He should have just ignored it. Because no one believes such nonsensical things.
Okay. Mr. Sadji, apart from the facts of the case, the process is also a very important part of the justice delivery system, and as a law student, one of the first principles we read is principle of natural justice, and that the person hearing accused or against who allegations are made should not be hearing the judge in their own cause. And on that, the action of the Chief Justice today is taking part in the hearing, although the final order once again did not have his name but the name of only two of the judges, has has become a topic of debate, sir. What is your view on that particular?
But look, he didn't take any part. He himself recused himself. But he made those statements better if he hadn't done it. He should have just ignored it completely and left it to the other judges. Because that gives rise to controversy. And in India, anything can give rise to controversy. So, but nothing wrong in that, but it would have been better, more appropriate if he had just not dealt with it all. After all, of course, the other bench who decided the matter, he wasn't there at all. He had recused himself, and rightly so. Justice Khanna and Justice Arun Mishra or someone, yeah. Yes. So that's okay.
It's not for me to say whether the allegations are true or false. A competent authority will decide on those issues. However, it really is very disturbing that the Chief Justice of India and his two brother judges took so much notice of those letters and affidavits and held a hearing on a Saturday morning. I'm alarmed by the fact that he was sitting on the bench himself and used that platform to make several statements which he could well have made in a press release or at a press conference. I'm also a bit surprised by the fact that he chose those two particular judges to sit with him. One, of course, being Justice Sanjeev Khanna, who is one of the junior-most judges of the court and who, as we all know, leapfrogged over 33 other judges senior to him to the Supreme Court, and Justice Arun Mishra. I do not understand why the 5 senior-most judges of the court were not sitting, barring, of course, the Chief Justice himself. So my concern is with due process of law. The case will take its own course, and as I said at the commencement, it is not my place to say whether the allegations are true or false. But I do say that due process has been compromised.
All right. That's in fact part of a larger conversation which you will find on the website bloombergquint.com. Apart from that, there are also several other stories that you'll find if you look up. In fact, a lot of updates generated over the weekend. So, well, let me take you through a couple of stories. Net employment generation in the formal sector almost trebled to 8.61 lakh in February compared to 2.87 lakh in the same month of last year, according to the latest Employees Provident Fund Organization payroll data. The retirement body has been releasing payroll data from April of 2018, covering the period starting September 2017. And SpiceJet could be the biggest beneficiary of Jet Airways' fall from grace as India decides to prefer airlines with extra capacity to allot time slots vacated by the grounded airline instead of following the norms that call for preference to new entrants. Well, that's all you need to know going into trade today, but do stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for a lot more news and a lot more updates.